The dust cloud rising from the canyon floor told Zelda Carver that something was wrong before she even heard the screaming. She had been gathering wild sage in the foothills above her father's struggling ranch when the panicked whinny of a horse cut through the afternoon air like a knife. Zelda dropped her basket and ran toward the sound, her worn boots sliding on the loose gravel as she descended the slope. The Montana Territory in 1882 was unforgiving country, and a spooked horse could mean death for rider and animal alike. When she reached the narrow canyon pass, she found a scene of chaos. A beautiful chestnut mare was tangled in old barbed wire someone had carelessly discarded, her eyes rolling white with terror as she thrashed against the metal cutting into her legs. Blood streaked her coat, and with each panicked movement, the wire bit deeper. A man stood several yards away, rope in hand, clearly afraid to approach the wounded animal. Zelda did not hesitate. She walked forward with her hands slightly raised, her voice dropping to a low murmur that seemed to come from somewhere deep in her chest. The words were not quite English, not quite anything identifiable, but rather a sound that seemed to bypass language altogether and speak directly to something primal. The mare's ears flicked toward her, and though her sides still heaved with fear, the thrashing slowed. "Easy now, beautiful girl," Zelda whispered, her voice honey and smoke. "Nobody here wants to hurt you. I know it burns. I know you are scared, but fighting only makes the teeth bite harder." She moved closer, still speaking in that strange, melodious way. The mare's breathing began to slow, her wild eyes fixing on Zelda's face. When Zelda was close enough to touch her, she placed one hand on the horse's sweat-drenched neck and continued her murmuring, her other hand carefully beginning to work at the tangled wire. "That is it, sweet one. You are so brave, so strong. Let me help you now. Your mama would be proud of how brave you are being." The man watching was tall, broad-shouldered, with sun-weathered skin and dark hair that needed cutting. He wore the practical clothes of a working cowboy, dusty from travel, and his hat was pushed back on his head as he stared at the scene before him with something like wonder on his face. It took Zelda nearly 20 minutes to carefully free the mare from the wire, all while maintaining that constant stream of soft words. When the last strand fell away, she examined the cuts carefully, her fingers gentle but sure as she assessed the damage. Nothing too deep, thank God. The mare stood perfectly still now, her head lowered, breathing quietly as Zelda continued to touch her and speak to her. "You speak their language," the man said finally, his voice rough with amazement. "I have been around horses my whole life, and I have never seen anything like that." Zelda looked up at him properly for the first time. He had striking gray-green eyes that reminded her of the river after a storm, and there was intelligence in his weathered face. Something in her chest gave an unexpected flutter, which she firmly ignored. "Horses are not so different from people," she said, turning her attention back to the mare. "They just need someone to listen. This girl needs cleaning and bandaging. Is she yours?" "She is. Name is Owen Xander. I was bringing her and 3 others from my ranch near Butte to sell, but she spooked at a rattlesnake about a mile back and bolted. I have been tracking her for the better part of 2 hours. He paused, then added, "And you are Zelda Carver. My father has a ranch about 3 miles west of here." "The Carver place, I know it. Small operation, mostly horses if I recall correctly." "Not much of an operation anymore," Zelda said, more bitterly than she had intended. "My father died 6 months ago. Fever took him fast. It has just been me and our hired hand since, and we are barely keeping things together." The words came out before she could stop them, and she felt her cheeks warm with embarrassment. She did not make a habit of sharing her troubles with strangers, but something about this man's steady presence had loosened her tongue. Owen was quiet for a moment, studying her with those river-colored eyes. That is hard country for a woman alone. No other family. My mother died bringing me into the world. My father never remarried. Said once you had known perfect love, everything else would just be settling. She stood up, wiping her dusty hands on her split riding skirt. Your mare should not travel far today. The wounds need proper tending. You can bring her to our place. It is not much, but we have clean water and medical supplies. I would be grateful for that, Owen said, and I would be happy to pay you for your trouble. No payment necessary. Any decent person would help an injured animal. But as she took the mare's makeshift rope halter and began leading her up the canyon trail, she could feel Owen's eyes on her back, warm as sunshine. The Carver ranch was indeed small, just a weathered house, a barn that needed new shingles and a handful of corrals. But it was clean and well-maintained despite its obvious struggles. The hired hand, an old Mexican man named Diego who had worked for her father for 20 years, came out of the barn as they approached. "Señorita Zelda, you bring home another one," he said with a mixture of exasperation and fondness. "This one belongs to Mr. Xander here," Zelda replied. "Got herself tangled in wire down in Copper Canyon." Diego clicked his tongue sympathetically and immediately moved to help. Between the three of them, they got the mare into the barn and cross-tied in the wash stall. Zelda worked with practiced efficiency, cleaning the wounds with careful precision while maintaining that constant low murmur of sound. Owen watched her hands move, watched the way the mare stood perfectly calm despite what must have been considerable pain. "Where did you learn that?" he asked finally. "That way you talk to them." Zelda did not look up from her work, carefully applying a salve she had made herself from herbs and beeswax. "I do not know that I learned it anywhere. Horses have always made more sense to me than people. When I was little, my father used to say I spent more time in the barn than in the house." The horses just started talking back at some point. They talk back. Now she did look up, and there was a hint of amusement in her dark eyes. Not with words, obviously, but if you pay attention, they tell you everything you need to know. This girl, for instance. She is telling me she is embarrassed about spooking at that snake. She thinks she should have been braver. She is also telling me she is very grateful for the clean water and the fact that the burning has stopped. Owen shook his head slowly. "Most people would say you are crazy." "Most people do say I am crazy," Zelda replied calmly, beginning to wrap the worst of the wounds with clean cloth. "I am an unmarried woman of 22 living alone on a failing ranch, talking to horses like they are family. But they cross the street when they see me coming. The good church women think I am touched in the head or possibly a witch. Are you? A witch, I mean." She laughed then, a genuine sound that lit up her whole face. "If I were, do you not think I would have magicked myself a better situation than this? No, Mr. Xander. I am just someone who understands horses better than I understand people. It is not magic. It is paying attention." When the mare was fully bandaged and comfortable in a clean stall with fresh hay and water, Zelda invited Owen to the house. It would be rude not to, and besides, there was something about him that intrigued her despite herself. Diego had already disappeared to finish his evening chores, leaving them alone in the fading light. The house was neat but sparse, with the feeling of a place where someone was holding on by their fingernails. Still, Zelda had coffee on the stove within minutes, and she set out some bread and preserves she had made from wild plums. "You said you have a ranch near Butte?" she asked, settling into a chair across from him at the scarred kitchen table. "About 15 miles northeast of town. The Double X. My father started it 30 years ago, and when he passed 2 years back, it came to me. We run cattle mostly, but I keep a string of good horses. That mare you helped today, I raised her from a foal. She is one of the best I have bred. She is beautiful. Good bone structure, intelligent eyes. Someone will be lucky to have her. Actually, I was planning to keep her, Owen said, wrapping his hands around the coffee cup. Use her for breeding stock, but I am taking 3 others to the sale in Butt next week. They talked as the light faded outside, conversation flowing easier than Zelda would have expected. Owen told her about his ranch, about the challenges of running it alone since his father's death. His mother had died when he was young, and his only brother had gone east to become a lawyer, wanting nothing to do with ranch life. So you understand, Zelda said softly. That feeling of being tethered to a place that is slowly drowning you, but not being able to let it go because it is all you have left of them. I do, Owen admitted. Though in fairness, the Double X is doing well enough. We have good water and decent grazing. Your situation sounds considerably harder. Zelda's jaw tightened slightly. We are managing. Are you? The directness of the question caught her off guard. She wanted to bristle, to tell him it was none of his business, but the genuine concern in his eyes stopped her. No, she said finally, the admission feeling like pulling a splinter. We are not managing. We are failing slowly. Diego is loyal, but he is 68 years old and cannot do the heavy work he used to. We have 12 horses, but no real way to break and train them for sale. I can gentle them, get them comfortable with people, but I do not have the size or strength to do the serious saddle work. And without sellable horses, we have no income. We are maybe 3 months from losing everything. The silence that followed was heavy. Owen studied his coffee cup for a long moment before speaking. What if I helped you? Zelda's head jerked up. What? I need to be in this area for the next month anyway. I have business in Butt and some land I am looking at nearby. What if I stayed here, helped you break those horses properly so you could sell them? In exchange, you could teach me that thing you do, that way of speaking to them. It would be valuable for my breeding program. You want to stay here at my ranch? I would pay for room and board, of course. And I would do the heavy work. Diego could supervise, make sure everything is done to his standards. But between the 2 of us, we could have those horses ready for sale within a month. Maybe make enough to get you through another year, buy you time to figure out a longer-term solution. It was a practical offer, a generous offer, and exactly the kind of help Zelda needed. So why did her instinct scream at her to refuse? Maybe because Owen Xander made her feel things she had not felt before. Maybe because the way he looked at her made her skin warm and her thoughts scatter. Maybe because she had spent her whole life being careful, being controlled, and something about him felt dangerous in a way that had nothing to do with physical threat. That would be inappropriate, she said finally. An unmarried man staying at the home of an unmarried woman. The gossips in Butt would have a field day. The gossips in Butt already think you are strange, Owen pointed out reasonably. And Diego would be here as a chaperone. I could sleep in the barn. It would all be completely proper and businesslike. Why would you do this? You do not know me. Owen was quiet for a long moment, his eyes holding hers across the table. Because watching you with that mare today was like watching someone perform a miracle. Because I spent 3 years watching my father's ranch nearly fail after my mother died and he lost heart, and I know what it looks like when someone is drowning. Because you helped my horse when you did not have to, and because... He paused, then continued quietly, because something tells me I need to. Zelda's heart was hammering against her ribs. This was foolish, reckless, exactly the kind of decision her practical father would have cautioned her against. 1 month, she heard herself say. You can stay for 1 month. But if Diego objects, the deal is off. Diego did not object. In fact, when Zelda explained the arrangement to him the next morning, the old man's weathered face split into the widest grin she had seen from him in months. "Es bueno, señorita," he said firmly. "You need the help, and this Owen, he seems like a good man, strong, knows his way around horses, and the way he looks at you." Diego waggled his eyebrows expressively. "He does not look at me any particular way," Zelda protested, feeling her cheeks heat. "Si, señorita, whatever you say." But Diego was still grinning as he walked away. Owen moved into the barn that same day, setting up a bedroll in the tack room that was surprisingly comfortable. He insisted on paying Zelda $20 upfront for the month's accommodation and meals, which was more than fair and would cover several pressing expenses. Then they got to work. The first horse they tackled was a 3-year-old gelding named Smoke, a gray with good lines but a skittish temperament. Owen started the way any cowboy would, with patience and firm handling. But after watching Zelda work her magic for a few minutes, getting Smoke calm and focused, he shook his head in wonder. "All right," he said. "Teach me. What are you doing that I am not?" Zelda considered him for a moment, then stepped back from the horse. "Come here. Stand next to him, but do not touch him yet." Owen complied, and Zelda moved to stand beside him, so close she could smell the clean scent of his soap mixed with leather and sun-warmed skin. She tried to ignore the flutter in her stomach. "Most people think working with horses is about dominance," she said quietly. "About being the boss. And there is some truth to that. Horses are herd animals. They need to know you are the leader. But it is not about force. It is about respect and understanding. Close your eyes." "What?" "Close your eyes. Trust me." Owen closed his eyes, and Zelda could see the slight tension in his jaw, the way his hands flexed slightly at his sides. "Now stop thinking about what you want the horse to do. Stop planning your next move. Just breathe, listen, feel." "What is Smoke telling you right now?" "I do not understand what that means." "Yes, you do. You have been around horses your whole life. You know how to read their body language. You just do it with your eyes instead of with everything else. What do you hear?" Owen was quiet for a long moment, his breathing slowly deepening and settling. "His breathing is a little fast, nervous." "Good, what else?" "He is shifting his weight, back and forth." "What does that mean?" "He is uncertain, not sure if he should stay or bolt." "Exactly." "Now open your eyes, but keep that awareness, that listening, and talk to him. Not commands, not orders. Just talk to him like he is someone you care about who is scared." Owen opened his eyes and looked at the gray gelding for a long moment. Then slowly he began to speak, his deep voice dropping to a gentle rumble that Zelda felt in her bones. "Hey there, Smoke. I know you are not sure about me. That is all right. I am not sure about a lot of things either lately, but I am not going to hurt you. Just want to help you become the best version of yourself. Help you find a good home with someone who will treat you right." As he spoke, Owen slowly extended his hand, not grabbing or demanding, just offering. Smoke's ears flicked forward, his shifting slowed, and after a moment the gelding stretched his neck out and snuffled at Owen's palm. "I will be damned," Owen breathed. "You already knew how to do this," Zelda said softly. "You just had to remember. Horses do not speak English, but they understand intention. They understand emotion. When you talk to them with genuine care, with respect, they know, they feel it." Over the following days, they developed a rhythm. Zelda would gentle the horses first, getting them comfortable and trusting. Then Owen would do the heavier work of saddle training and riding, using the communication techniques Zelda taught him. It was remarkable how much faster the process went when the horses were not fighting them every step of the way. But it was not just the work that was developing. Between the long hours in the corrals and the shared meals in the evening, Zelda and Owen were developing something else entirely. something that made Zelda's breath catch when he smiled at her, something that made Owen find excuses to stand close to her, to brush her hand accidentally on purpose. One evening, about 2 weeks into his stay, they were sitting on the porch after dinner, watching the sun paint the Montana sky in shades of gold and crimson. Diego had already retired to his small cabin behind the barn, and the night insects were beginning their chorus. "Tell me about your mother," Owen said suddenly. Zelda glanced at him in surprise. Most people avoided the topic, uncomfortable with the tragedy of a woman dying in childbirth. "There is not much to tell. I never knew her. But your father must have talked about her." "Constantly," Zelda admitted, a small smile touching her lips. "He said she was the daughter of a Crow woman and a French fur trapper, that she could ride before she could walk, that she sang to the horses in 3 languages and they followed her like she was made of sugar and oats. So that is where you get it from. Maybe. My father always said I had her way with animals. He used to joke that I inherited her gift but not her good sense, since she had the bad judgment to marry a struggling rancher." Zelda's voice softened, but he always said it with so much love. Like even though he lost her, he would make the same choice 1,000 times over. "That is how love should be," Owen said quietly. "Not practical or safe, just inevitable." Something in his tone made Zelda's heart skip. She turned to look at him and found him already watching her, his eyes intense in the fading light. "Owen," she started, but he shook his head. "I know. I am leaving in 2 weeks. This is just business. I should not complicate things." "Then why are you?" "Because I cannot seem to help myself," he admitted roughly. "Because I think about you every moment we are apart. Because watching you with those horses, watching your face light up when one of them finally understands, is the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. Because you are brilliant and strong and completely unlike anyone I have ever met." Zelda's throat felt tight. "I think about you too, more than I should, more than is wise. What if we stopped worrying about wisdom? Owen, you have a successful ranch, a life. I have a failing operation and a very uncertain future. We live in different worlds. We live 15 miles apart. That is not different worlds, that is neighboring ranches. You know what I mean." He did. The gulf between a prosperous rancher and a struggling single woman with a reputation for oddness was wider than mere miles. But Owen stood up, crossed the small space between them, and held out his hand. "Dance with me." "What? There is no music, so we will make our own." It was absurd. It was foolish. But Zelda put her hand in his and let him pull her to her feet. They had no music, but Owen began to hum a slow tune, something sweet and a little sad, and then they were moving together on the weathered porch boards. His hand was warm on her waist, solid and sure, and she could feel the strength in his body as he led her through the simple steps. "I have not danced since I was 17, she confessed. "My father took me to a social in Butte. I lasted 20 minutes before I got uncomfortable with all the staring and left." "Let them stare," Owen said. "Let the whole world stare. You are magnificent, Zelda Carver." He pulled her closer, and she let him, resting her head against his shoulder and closing her eyes. For just this moment, she let herself believe it could be this simple, that she could have this. When the song ended, neither of them moved. Owen's hand came up to cup her cheek, tilting her face toward his. "Tell me to stop," he whispered. "I cannot." The kiss was soft at first, gentle and questioning. But when Zelda's hands came up to grip his shirt, something ignited between them. Owen pulled her flush against him, deepening the kiss, and Zelda felt like she was falling and flying at the same time. This was nothing like the few chaste kisses she had received from awkward ranch hands in her youth. This was consuming. This was everything. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Owen rested his forehead against hers. "Well," he said unevenly. That complicated things. Despite everything, Zelda laughed. You think? They stood there for a long moment, wrapped in each other, before Zelda gently pulled away. You should get some rest. Tomorrow we start working with lightning and he is going to be a challenge. Zelda, please, I need to think. I just need to think. Owen studied her face, then nodded slowly. All right, but Zelda, this is not nothing to me. I need you to know that. It is not nothing to me either. That is what scares me. That night, Zelda lay in her bed staring at the ceiling, her fingers touching her lips where she could still feel the ghost of his kiss. Everything about this was complicated. Everything about this was a terrible idea, and yet her heart refused to listen to reason. The next morning, Zelda was up before dawn as usual. She had not slept well, her mind spinning with thoughts of Owen, of the kiss, of what any of it meant for her uncertain future. When she came out to the barn, she found him already there, working with lightning in the round pen. The black gelding was living up to his name, moving fast and nervous around the perimeter. But Owen was patient, keeping his body language non-threatening while maintaining clear boundaries. As Zelda watched, she could see him using the techniques she had taught him, that soft communication that was more feeling than words. You are up early, she said, climbing onto the fence rail beside Diego, who was also watching. He has been here since before the sun, Diego said approvingly. This one, he is a worker, and he is good with the horses. You were right to accept his help, señorita. They spent the morning working together in comfortable partnership, and if there was a new awareness between them, a heightened consciousness of every accidental touch, neither mentioned it. By midday, lightning had calmed considerably, enough to accept a saddle blanket without panicking. He will be ready to ride in a few days, Owen assessed, wiping sweat from his forehead. And the other three are coming along even faster. You are going to have a good string to sell, Zelda. This should bring in solid money. Thanks to you. Thanks to both of us. I do the muscle work, but you do the magic. It is not magic. Maybe not, but it is remarkable. They were standing close in the hot sun, and Zelda could feel that pull between them again, magnetic and undeniable. Before she could second-guess herself, she reached out and took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. About last night, she started. You do not have to explain. I understand if you regretted it. That is the problem. I do not regret it at all, and I should. Owen turned to face her fully, his other hand coming up to cradle her face. Why should you regret something that feels right? Because feelings are not enough. Because in 2 weeks, you will go back to your ranch and I will still be here, struggling to keep my head above water. Because caring about someone means they have the power to hurt you, and I have had enough loss in my life. What if I did not go back? Or what if you came with me? Zelda's breath caught. Owen, that is not a solution. I cannot just abandon this place. It is all I have of my father. And you cannot abandon your ranch either. We both know that. Then what if we figured out a way to make both places work? What if this does not have to be an ending? Before Zelda could answer, Diego called out from the barn. Señorita, a rider is coming. They broke apart, and Zelda shaded her eyes to see a cloud of dust approaching fast. As the rider got closer, she recognized the horse. It was Cobb Jenkins, one of the hands from the Prescott Ranch, the large operation that bordered her property to the south. Cobb pulled up hard, his horse lathered and breathing heavily. Miss Carver, we got trouble. Some of our cattle broke through the fence and are headed toward Copper Canyon, but there is worse. Storm spooked them and they are stampeding. If they go through the canyon, they will hit your lower pasture where your horses are grazing. Those horses will not stand a chance if the cattle come through. Zelda's blood went cold. She had 6 horses in that pasture, including 2 pregnant mares. How long do we have? 20 minutes. Maybe less. We got men trying to turn them, but it is not looking good. Owen was already moving. Zelda, you and Diego start getting the horses from the corrals moved to the upper pasture, away from danger. I will ride down and see if I can help turn those cattle. I am coming with you. Zelda, those are my horses in danger. I am coming. There was no time to argue. Zelda ran for the barn, Owen and Cobb right behind her. Within minutes, she had her father's old bay gelding, Ranger, saddled and ready. Owen took the chestnut mare, who had healed well over the past 2 weeks, and the three of them rode out hard toward Copper Canyon. They could hear the cattle before they saw them, the thunder of hundreds of hooves and the bellowing of frightened animals. When they crested the ridge above the canyon, Zelda's stomach dropped. The herd was massive, maybe 200 head, and they were barreling straight for the narrow canyon pass with the single-minded terror of spooked cattle. 3 Prescott Ranch hands were trying to turn them, but they might as well have been trying to redirect a river with their bare hands. We need to split them, Owen shouted over the noise. Get them divided before they hit the canyon. If even half go through, your horses are done for. Zelda's mind raced. The cattle were too far gone for normal turning techniques. They were in full panic mode and nothing short of a wall would stop them, unless— I have an idea, she yelled. But you are going to think I am crazy. I already think you are crazy. Whatever it is, do it fast. Zelda kicked Ranger into a run, angling to get ahead of the stampede. Owen cursed and followed her, clearly thinking she was going to get herself killed. But Zelda had grown up in this country. She knew its rhythms, its dangers, and its possibilities. There was a narrow bottleneck about 300 yards ahead, where the canyon walls briefly constricted before opening up again. If she could get there first, if she could block that passage, the cattle would be forced to turn. But one rider would not be enough to turn them. One rider would just get trampled, unless that rider was loud enough. Zelda reached the bottleneck with seconds to spare. She wheeled Ranger around to face the oncoming stampede, and then she opened her mouth and screamed. Not words, not anything human. The sound that came out of her was wild and primal, the sound of a mountain lion's scream mixed with something even more ancient. It was the sound horses made when they were truly afraid, amplified through human vocal cords. Ranger danced beneath her, alarmed but trusting, and the sound echoed off the canyon walls, multiplying and distorting until it filled the entire space. The lead cattle faltered, confused and frightened by this new threat. Zelda screamed again, and Ranger reared impressively, his hooves striking the air. Owen reached her side a heartbeat later, immediately understanding what she was trying to do. He added his own shouts to hers, and together with the other riders coming in from the sides, they created enough chaos and noise to break the stampede's momentum. The lead cattle turned, flowing to the left away from the bottleneck, and the rest of the herd followed, their panic finding a new direction. Within minutes, the Prescott hands had the herd moving away from the canyon entirely. The immediate danger passed. Zelda slumped in her saddle, her throat raw, her whole body shaking with adrenaline. Owen was beside her in an instant, his hand gripping her arm. "Are you all right? That was the bravest and stupidest thing I have ever seen anyone do. Did it work? You just turned a stampede with nothing but your voice and sheer nerve." "Yes, it worked." Cobb rode up to them, his face split in a huge grin. "Miss Carver, that was something else. I have been working cattle for 15 years and never seen anything like that. You saved those horses of yours, and probably saved us from having to explain to Mr. Prescott how we lost half his herd over a cliff." By the time they rode back to the ranch, Zelda's adrenaline crash was hitting hard. Diego met them at the barn, relief evident on his weathered face. "The horses in the corrals are secure. I heard the cattle turned. Was that your doing, señorita? Zelda turned them, Owen said, helping her dismount since her legs were shaking too badly to manage it gracefully. She is either the bravest woman in Montana or completely insane. Maybe both. Definitely both, Zelda managed, then found herself laughing, half hysterical with relief and lingering fear. I thought we were going to die. I really thought those cattle were going to run us down. Owen's arms came around her, pulling her against his chest, and Zelda let herself lean into his strength. She could feel his heart pounding as hard as hers, feel the fine tremor in his muscles that said he had been just as frightened as she was. "Do not ever do that again," he said roughly into her hair. "Do you hear me? I cannot watch you nearly die, I cannot. I had to, those horses, I know you had to, but Zelda, if something had happened to you." He pulled back enough to look at her, and the raw emotion in his face made her chest tighten. "I love you. I know it is too soon and this is all happening too fast, but I love you, and the thought of losing you makes everything else in my life feel meaningless." Zelda's breath caught. "Owen, you do not have to say it back, I just needed you to know. Whatever happens, whatever we decide about the future, I needed you to know that." But the words were rising in Zelda's chest, undeniable and true. "I love you too. I think I started loving you the moment you said I spoke their language, when you looked at me like my strangeness was not something to be ashamed of, but something wonderful. This kiss was different from the one on the porch. This was desperate and grateful, the kiss of two people who had just stared down death and found each other on the other side. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Diego was very deliberately looking the other way and whistling tunelessly. "I am too old to be seeing such things," he announced to no one in particular. "I go check the fence lines now." Despite everything, they both laughed. That evening, after they had tended to all the horses and assured themselves that everyone was safe and sound, Zelda and Owen sat at the kitchen table with coffee and the remains of a simple dinner. The enormity of what had happened, both with the stampede and with their declarations to each other, seemed to fill the room. "We need to talk about what happens next," Zelda said finally. "I know. I meant what I said before. I cannot just abandon this place. Even if it is failing, even if it is more burden than blessing, it is my father's legacy. It is all I have left of my family." Owen reached across the table and took her hand. "I am not asking you to abandon it, but Zelda, you have to be realistic. This ranch cannot sustain itself as it is. Even with the money from selling the horses, you are just delaying the inevitable unless something fundamental changes." "I know," she admitted quietly. "I have known that for months. I just have not wanted to face it. What if we combined operations? What if your ranch became part of the Double X?" Zelda's first instinct was to refuse outright, but she forced herself to really consider it, to set aside pride and sentiment and look at the practical reality. "You mean sell my land to you?" "No, I mean merge our operations. Keep this as a separate holding if you want, but run it as part of the larger ranch. Use this place for what it is best suited for, what you are best suited for, breeding and gentling horses. The Double X has the resources to support it, the hands to do the heavy work. You could focus on what you are brilliant at without having to also worry about whether you can afford to fix the barn roof or buy feed for the winter. And what would I be in this arrangement? An employee. You would be my partner, in every sense." Zelda's heart kicked hard against her ribs. "Owen, are you asking what I think you are asking?" He stood up and came around the table, then did something that made Zelda's throat go tight. He dropped to one knee beside her chair and took both her hands in his. "Zelda Carver, I know this is fast. I know we have only known each other 2 weeks, but I am 30 years old and I have never felt about anyone the way I feel about you. Marry me. Be my wife, my partner. Help me build something bigger than either of our ranches alone. Teach me more of that magic you do with horses. Let me spend the rest of my life watching you whisper to them like they are family." Tears were streaming down Zelda's face, and she could not seem to stop them. "You are crazy. People will say you are crazy for marrying the strange woman who talks to horses. Let them. You said it yourself. Let the whole world stare. I do not care what they think. I only care what you think." "I think," Zelda said, her voice breaking, "that you are the best man I have ever known. I think I would be a fool to say no. I think I am terrified and hopeful and so completely in love with you that it scares me. Is that a yes?" "Yes. Yes, Owen Xander, I will marry you." He stood up and pulled her into his arms, lifting her clear off her feet and spinning her around the kitchen while she laughed and cried at the same time. When he set her down, he kissed her thoroughly, and Zelda felt like her heart might burst from the sheer joy of it. They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony in Butte. Diego served as witness, along with Owen's ranch foreman, a gruff man named Samuel, who seemed cautiously pleased that his boss had found someone. The local preacher performed the ceremony in his small church, and if he had reservations about the bride's reputation, he kept them to himself. Zelda wore a simple blue dress that had been her mother's, carefully preserved all these years. Owen wore his best suit, and the way he looked at her when she walked down the short aisle made her feel like the most beautiful woman in the world. "I, Owen Xander, take you, Zelda Carver, to be my wife," he said clearly. "To have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish until death do us part." When it was her turn, Zelda's voice was steady despite the tears in her eyes. "I, Zelda Carver, take you, Owen Xander, to be my husband. To have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish until death do us part." The preacher pronounced them husband and wife, and when Owen kissed her, Zelda felt like she was sealing not just a marriage contract but a promise of a completely new life. They spent their wedding night at a modest hotel in Butte, and it was everything Zelda had not dared to dream about. Owen was gentle and patient, making sure she felt safe and cherished every moment. And when they finally came together, it felt like the most natural thing in the world, like two pieces finding their perfect fit. "I love you," Owen whispered against her hair afterward, holding her close. "I am going to spend every day of my life making sure you never regret this." "I could never regret you," Zelda replied, tracing patterns on his chest. "You saved me, Owen, not just my ranch, me. We saved each other. I was going through the motions of living before I met you. Running the ranch because it was what I was supposed to do, but not really feeling anything. You woke something up in me that I did not even know was sleeping." The next few months were a whirlwind of change. True to his word, Owen kept the Carver Ranch as a separate holding but integrated it into the Double X operations. He brought in 2 experienced hands to help Diego with the day-to-day work, which allowed the old man to transition into more of a supervisory role that his aging body could handle better. Zelda transformed the Carver place into exactly what Owen had envisioned, a specialized horse breeding and training operation. Word of her unique abilities with horses spread quickly, and soon ranchers from all over Montana were bringing her their problem animals. Horses that had been written off as too skittish or too mean to train became gentle and responsive under her care. She also began teaching her methods to others, holding informal workshops for cowboys and ranchers who wanted to learn a gentler approach to horse breaking. Some were skeptical at first, but when they saw the results, they became believers. Owen was her best student, and watching him develop his own version of her gift brought her immense pride. The double X prospered as well, with Zelda's help selecting breeding stock and improving their horse program, and Owen's skill at running the cattle operation. They became one of the most successful ranches in the region. But more than the success, it was the partnership that made Zelda happiest. They made decisions together, worked together, built something together that was stronger than either could have created alone. The first winter of their marriage was hard. Montana winters were always brutal, but that year was particularly harsh. They lost some cattle to the cold, and there were days when Zelda wondered if they would make it through. But Owen's steady presence and his absolute faith in her kept her going. And when spring finally came, bringing with it new calves and new foals, Zelda felt like she had survived something important, like they had been tested and had passed. It was in the second spring of their marriage that Zelda discovered she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks, but had not been certain until the traveling doctor who passed through Butte confirmed it. She told Owen that evening while they were in the barn checking on a mare who was due to foal soon. "Owen, I have something to tell you." He looked up from examining the mare's legs, his expression shifting to concern at her serious tone. "What is wrong? Are you all right?" "I am fine. Better than fine. I am pregnant. We are going to have a baby." For a moment, Owen just stared at her, his face completely blank. Then his eyes filled with tears, and he crossed the barn in 3 long strides and swept her into his arms. "A baby," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "We are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" "Happy? Zelda, I am over the moon, terrified but over the moon." He pulled back to look at her, his hands framing her face. "You are going to be such an incredible mother. Our children are going to grow up with horses like family and a mother who teaches them to listen to the world around them. They are going to be so loved." Zelda rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "I am terrified too. My mother died bringing me into the world. What if— Do not go down that road. You are strong and healthy, and we will get you the best care available. Nothing is going to happen to you. I will not allow it." His fierce protectiveness made her smile despite her fears. "I do not think you get a say in what life allows, Owen. Watch me. I did not find you just to lose you. You are stuck with me for the next 50 years at minimum." The pregnancy was not easy. Zelda suffered from terrible sickness in the first months and exhaustion that made even simple tasks feel overwhelming. But Owen was there every step of the way, taking over her heavier chores without complaint, bringing her tea and dry bread when nothing else would stay down, holding her hair back when she was sick. As her belly grew, so did her wonder. She would stand in front of the mirror in their bedroom, hands on the swelling curve, feeling the flutter of movement inside her, and marveling that she and Owen had created this new life together. "You want a boy or a girl?" Owen asked one night as they lay in bed, his hand resting on her stomach. "I do not care. As long as they are healthy and whole, I will be grateful. What about you?" "Same. Though I admit, the thought of a little girl who looks like you with your dark eyes and that stubborn chin makes me smile." "Stubborn chin. It is one of your finest features. You stick that chin out when you are determined about something, and heaven help anyone who gets in your way." Zelda laughed and swatted his hand playfully. "Well, a boy who looks like you would not be so bad either, strong and steady and kind." The baby came in early December, during a break in the worst of the winter storms. Zelda's labor started in the middle of the night, and Owen immediately sent one of the hands racing to town to fetch the doctor. But babies come on their own schedule, and by the time the doctor arrived, their son had already been born, delivered with Diego's help and Owen's terrified assistance. "A boy," Owen said, his voice full of wonder as he held the tiny, squalling infant. "We have a son." Zelda, exhausted but euphoric, reached out for the baby. When Owen placed him in her arms, she looked down at the red, wrinkled little face and felt her heart expand in a way she had not known was possible. This was her son, hers and Owen's. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "I am your mama. And that terrified-looking man over there is your papa. We have been waiting for you." They named him Owen Xander, and from the first day, he seemed to have his mother's temperament with horses. Even as an infant, he would quiet immediately when brought into the barn, his eyes tracking the movements of the animals with fascination. "He is going to be a horseman," Diego said approvingly when Oliver was 3 months old. "See how he watches. He has the gift, like his mama." Zelda could only hope it was true. As Oliver grew from infant to toddler, her hope became certainty. By the time he was 2, he was already toddling after her in the barn, his little hands reaching out to touch the horses with wonder and no fear. The horses, for their part, were remarkably gentle with him, as if they recognized he was someone special. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. The Double X continued to prosper, becoming known throughout Montana not just for quality cattle but for exceptional horses. Zelda's reputation grew as well. She became known as the woman who could heal broken horses, who could take animals others had given up on and transform them into trusted companions. It was not always easy. There were hard years when drought threatened the herds, when disease swept through, and they lost animals. There were times when Zelda and Owen argued about decisions, their strong personalities clashing. But they always came back together, always remembered that they were partners in every sense of the word. When Oliver was 4, Zelda became pregnant again. This time she knew what to expect, and while the pregnancy was still challenging, it was less frightening. Their second child, a daughter they named Olivia, was born in the spring, her arrival heralded by the birth of a dozen new foals. "She comes with good luck," Diego said, holding the infant with the ease of long practice. "The land is blessing your family, Senora." Zelda thought he might be right. That year was one of their best, with healthy calves, strong foals, and good prices at market. But more than the material success, it was the fullness of her life that amazed her. 4 years earlier, she had been alone and struggling, facing the probable loss of everything her father had built. Now she had a husband she loved deeply, 2 healthy children, and a thriving ranch. As the children grew, the house that had felt so empty and sparse when Zelda lived there alone became filled with noise and laughter. Oliver was serious and thoughtful like his father, but with his mother's intuitive understanding of animals. Olivia was more outgoing, chattering constantly and making friends with every person and creature she encountered. Zelda taught both children her way with horses, showing them how to listen with more than their ears, how to communicate with intention and respect. Owen taught them practical skills, how to mend a fence and read the weather and handle a rope. Together, they raised their children to be competent and compassionate, to understand that running a ranch meant caring for everything under their stewardship, human and animal alike. When Oliver was 8 and Olivia 6, they added to the family again. Twin boys this time, Jacob and James, who arrived early and small but healthy. Diego joked that the ranch would need to double in size to support all these children, but his eyes were warm with affection as he said it. "Your father would be so proud," he told Zelda one evening as they watched the 4 children playing in the yard while Owen worked with a young horse in the corral. "He would see what you have built, what you have become, and he would burst with pride." Tears pricked Zelda's eyes. "I hope so. I think about him often, about how scared I was when he died, how certain I was that I would lose everything. I wish he could have met Owen, I wish he could see his grandchildren. He sees, Diego said firmly. The dead are not so far away, I think, he knows, and he is happy. The years continued to pass, each one bringing its own challenges and joys. Oliver grew into a tall, quiet young man with his father's steady demeanor and his mother's gift with horses. He took over much of the training operation, developing his own reputation as someone who could handle even the most difficult animals. Olivia grew into a beautiful young woman with her mother's dark eyes and a social grace that neither parent quite understood where it came from. She had less interest in the day-to-day ranch work but a brilliant head for business, and by the time she was 18, she was managing much of the ranch's finances and negotiations. The twins were wild cards, full of energy and mischief. They kept everyone on their toes but also brought endless joy with their antics. They were naturals with cattle, fearless riders who seemed to communicate with each other in their own private language. When Diego died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 82, it felt like losing a piece of the family's foundation. He had been there through everything, the struggles and the triumphs, a steady presence that had helped guide them all. They buried him on a hill overlooking both ranches, with a view of the horses he had loved so much. He was a good man, Owen said quietly as they stood by the grave. One of the best I have known. He would have said the same about you, Zelda replied, leaning into her husband's solid warmth. They were in their 40s now, with gray beginning to thread through Owen's dark hair and lines of sun and laughter marking both their faces. But when he looked at her, Zelda still saw the same love that had been there from the beginning, constant and true. Life continued. Oliver married a quiet, competent woman named Sarah, who shared his love of horses. They built a house on the Carver property and took over the horse training operation fully, allowing Zelda to step back and simply enjoy working with the animals without the pressure of running a business. Olivia surprised everyone by marrying a banker from Butte and moving to town, though she stayed intimately involved in the ranch's business affairs. The twins showed no signs of settling down, too busy with the adventure of running cattle and breaking horses to think about romance. And then, 25 years after that day in Copper Canyon, when Owen had first heard Zelda speak to horses like they were family, they became grandparents. Oliver and Sarah's son, named Thomas after Zelda's father, was born on a bright autumn morning. Holding her grandson for the first time, looking down at his tiny, perfect face, Zelda felt the circle complete in a way she could not quite articulate. This child carried her father's name and her blood. He would grow up in the house her father had built, learning the same skills, walking the same land. "What are you thinking?" Owen asked softly, his arm around her shoulders as they looked at their grandson together. "I am thinking about the day we met. About how lost I felt, how certain I was that I was drowning. I am thinking about how one tangled horse and one good man changed everything. I am thinking about how lucky I am." "We are lucky," Owen corrected. "I was going through the motions before you. You gave me purpose. You gave me this." He gestured to encompass not just the baby but everything around them, the ranch, the family, the life they had built together. As the sun set over the Montana hills, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, 3 generations of the family gathered in the yard. The children were playing, their laughter carrying on the evening air. Horses moved peacefully in the corrals. The land that had almost been lost was now secure, thriving, ready to support the next generation and the one after that. Zelda stood on the porch of the house where she had grown up, with Owen's arm around her waist and her children and grandchild nearby. She thought about her father, about her mother she had never known, about Diego and all the others who had helped shape this life. She thought about that terrified young woman who had stood in this same spot, 25 years ago, watching her world crumble, not knowing that salvation was riding toward her in the form of a cowboy with kind eyes and a tangled horse. "You ever regret it?" she asked Owen quietly. "Choosing me, choosing this life." He turned to look at her, and the expression on his face was everything she needed to know. "Not for one single moment. You are the best decision I ever made, Zelda Xander. You and everything that came from us." Later that evening, after the family had dispersed to their various homes and the ranch had settled into nighttime quiet, Zelda walked out to the barn. It was a habit she had never broken, this evening walk to check on the horses one last time. Owen often joined her, as he did tonight. The barn was peaceful, filled with the soft sounds of horses drowsing in their stalls. Zelda moved from stall to stall, greeting each animal, laying her hand on warm necks and receiving soft nickers in return. "You still do it," Owen said, watching her with a smile. "Still whisper to them like they are family." "They are family," Zelda replied simply. "They always have been. They brought you to me, did they not? That they did, and I will be forever grateful." They stood together in the barn, surrounded by the horses, and Owen pulled Zelda into his arms. She rested her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat, strong and steady as it had been for 25 years. "I love you," she said softly. "More now than even at the beginning, if that is possible." "It is possible, because I feel the same way." "Every year with you is better than the last, Zelda. You are my home." They stood there for a long time, two people who had found each other against all odds, who had built something lasting and true. Outside, the Montana sky blazed with stars, and the land stretched out in all directions, wild and beautiful and theirs. In the stall nearest them, a mare nuzzled her new foal, and the little one struggled to his feet on wobbly legs. His mother nickered encouragingly, and the foal took his first tentative steps. "New beginnings," Owen said, watching the scene with a smile. "Always," Zelda agreed. "As long as we have each other and this land and these horses, there will always be new beginnings." And as they walked back to the house together, hand in hand under the stars, Zelda knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The scared, lonely woman who had thought she was failing at everything had instead found the greatest success possible. Not measured in money or land or reputation, but in love and family, in a life built with purpose and care. She had whispered to horses like they were family, and a cowboy had said she spoke their language. From that simple beginning had grown everything else, a marriage that strengthened with time, children and grandchildren who would carry on the legacy, and a partnership that had proved stronger than any challenge they faced. As they reached the porch, Zelda looked back at the barn one more time, at the corrals and the land beyond. Tomorrow would bring its own work, its own challenges. There would be horses to train and cattle to tend, children to advise and a ranch to run. But tonight, there was just this: the peace of a life well lived, the comfort of a hand held in the darkness, and the absolute certainty of love that would last until the stars themselves burned out. "Ready for bed?" Owen asked, his thumb tracing circles on the back of her hand. "Ready," Zelda replied, and together they went inside, closing the door on another perfect day in a life full of them. The years that followed brought more changes, as years always do. Olivia gave them 2 more grandchildren, city children who nonetheless loved visiting the ranch and learning its ways. The twins eventually settled down, Jacob marrying a rancher's daughter from a neighboring spread, and James surprising everyone by falling for a schoolteacher who had moved to Butte from back east. The Double X expanded, acquiring more land, running more cattle and horses. But it never lost its heart, that core value that Zelda and Owen had built it on. Animals were treated with respect and care. The land was worked but also preserved. Employees were paid fairly and treated like family. Oliver and Sarah had 3 more children, and the house on the Carver property rang with the sound of young voices just as the main house once had. The horse training operation became renowned throughout not just Montana but the surrounding territories. People traveled from far and wide to learn Zelda's methods, to buy horses trained with her gentle approach. As Zelda and Owen moved into their 50s and then 60s, they gradually turned over more of the day-to-day operations to their children. But they never fully retired. Owen could still be found most mornings checking fence lines or working with the cattle crew. Zelda still spent hours in the barn, still whispered to horses like they were family, still worked her particular magic with animals that others had given up on. They had become fixtures in the community, respected not just for their success but for their character. The whispers about Zelda being strange or touched had long since faded, replaced by admiration. She was invited to speak at gatherings, to teach workshops, to consult on difficult cases. The wild woman who talked to horses had become a valued expert, though she never put on airs about it. On their 30th anniversary, their children threw them a celebration at the ranch. It seemed like half of Montana showed up, filling the yard and barn with laughter and music. There was dancing and food and stories told late into the night. At one point, Oliver stood up to make a toast. He was a man in his 30s now, with children of his own, but when he looked at his parents, his eyes shone with the same adoration they had held when he was a boy. "To my parents," he said, raising his glass, "who taught us that success is not measured in acres or dollars, but in how you treat the people and animals in your care. Who showed us that true partnership means supporting each other through everything, good and bad. Who built not just a ranch but a legacy of compassion and hard work. We love you both more than words can say." The crowd erupted in cheers and applause, and Zelda felt tears streaming down her face. Owen pulled her close, kissing her temple, and she could feel that he was emotional too. 30 years, he murmured, and I would marry you all over again tomorrow. Just tomorrow. I would marry you every day for the rest of my life. Then it is a good thing we already did, because I am not sure the preacher would put up with us showing up that often. They danced that night, just as they had on the porch all those years ago. Except now they moved with the ease of 3 decades of practice, anticipating each other's steps, moving as one. Their children danced around them and their grandchildren ran wild in the gathering darkness, and everything was exactly as it should be. As the years continued to pass, there were losses along with the joys. Friends died, old horses were laid to rest, challenges arose that tested them. But through it all, Zelda and Owen faced everything together, their partnership as strong as ever when they were in their 70s, moving slower but still active, still engaged with the ranch and family. Zelda had a health scare. A bad fall from a horse resulted in a broken hip and months of difficult recovery. For the first time in her life, she was truly sidelined, unable to do the physical work she loved. Owen was there through all of it, patient and steady as he had always been. He helped her with physical therapy exercises, even when she was frustrated and snapping at him. He read to her in the evenings when she was too tired to do anything else. He reminded her, again and again, that she was not defined by what she could do but by who she was. "I feel useless," she confessed one particularly difficult day. "I cannot train horses. I cannot even walk to the barn without help. What good am I?" "You are the center of this family," Owen said firmly. "You are my wife, the mother of our children, the grandmother our grandchildren adore. You are the woman who taught a whole generation of ranchers to treat their animals with respect and compassion. A broken hip does not change any of that." Slowly, painfully, Zelda recovered. She never quite got back to where she had been before the fall, but she adapted. She could no longer do the physical work of horse training, but she could teach, could observe and advise. She became even more focused on passing down her knowledge, working with her grandchildren and other young people who wanted to learn. It was during this time that she wrote down her methods for the first time, creating a manual of sorts that detailed her approach to working with horses. Oliver helped her edit it, and Sarah drew illustrations. When it was finished, they had copies made and distributed it free to anyone who wanted to learn. "Your legacy," Owen said, holding the finished booklet. "Everything you know, preserved so it can help people and horses long after we are gone. Strange to think about, is it not, being gone? I used to be so afraid of death when I was younger, afraid of ending up like my mother, dying young and leaving nothing behind. But now, looking at all of this," she gestured to encompass not just the ranch but everything they had built together, "I am not afraid anymore. Whatever happens, we made something good. We loved well. That is enough." They made it to their 40th anniversary, a milestone that felt miraculous and earned. The celebration was smaller this time, just family, but no less meaningful. 4 children, 12 grandchildren, and 2 great-grandchildren gathered to honor the marriage that had started it all. "Tell us the story again," one of the great-grandchildren begged. "About how you met." Zelda and Owen exchanged a glance, and she could see the same memories playing behind his eyes that were playing behind hers. A dusty canyon, a tangled horse, a moment that changed everything. "I was gathering sage," Zelda began, her voice still strong despite her years. "And I heard a horse screaming." She told the story as she had told it dozens of times over the years, but it never got old. The family listened, rapt, even those who had heard it many times before. When she got to the part where Owen said, "You speak their language," the children sighed happily. "It is the most romantic thing ever," one of the granddaughters said. "Finding love when you least expected it. The best things in life usually come when you are not looking for them," Owen said, his hand finding Zelda's and squeezing gently. "I was not looking for a wife when I went to sell those horses. I was just trying to run my ranch and get by, but life had other plans." "Better plans," Zelda added, "much better plans." As the sun set on their 40th anniversary, Zelda and Owen sat on the porch of the main house, watching their extended family interact. The children were playing in the yard, the adults were talking and laughing, and horses moved peacefully in the corrals beyond. "We did good, did we not?" Zelda said softly. "We did great," Owen corrected. "We built something that will last long after we are gone, not just the ranch but the family, the values, the way of treating animals and land and people with respect. That is the real legacy. I love you, Owen Xander. Thank you for seeing me all those years ago, for seeing something worthwhile in the strange woman who talked to horses. I love you too, Zelda Xander, and you were never strange. You were extraordinary, you still are." They sat together as the stars came out, 2 people who had beaten the odds and built a life of meaning and joy. The Wild West was not quite so wild anymore. Montana was moving toward statehood, and the world was changing rapidly. But here, on this land, in this moment, everything was timeless. A horse whinnied from the barn, and without thinking, Zelda answered with that low, melodious sound that was part language and part magic. The horse called back, and Zelda smiled. "Still talking to them," Owen observed with amusement. "Always. They are family, after all. That they are." As the moon rose over the Montana hills, casting silver light across the ranch that had been built with love and sweat and determination, Zelda Xander closed her eyes and gave thanks. for the horses that had been her first language, for the cowboy who had understood, for the children and grandchildren who would carry it all forward, for a life that had been hard but so very, very good. She whispered to horses like they were family, and a cowboy had said she spoke their language. From those simple beginnings had grown an empire of love, and it would stand for generations to come, a testament to what two people could build when they worked together, loved completely, and never gave up on each other or their dreams.